Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. The winter break is officially underway. Lots of discussion on Daniel Ricciardo potentially joining Cadillac for their new Formula 1 project, but also what about the 2026 cars when Cadillac are coming into the sport? Rumour has it they've made major changes behind the scenes to the technical regulations, and they've today published what those new cars are going to look like. We saw the renders a couple of months ago now for what the 2026 cars were going to look like. Now we have an updated version. Quite substantial changes here for what the teams are hoping will make the cars far faster than what was being discussed a few months ago. Which teams are most likely to benefit from these changes? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. We're going to start right here with Ferrari. They confirmed their discussions with Cadillac, of course, for the new engines come 2026. And we've heard Vigna and also Vasseur now basically mention this benefits Ferrari, this ongoing technical partnership, certainly when it comes to the efficiency and the consistency of those 2026 engines from like a reliability perspective, where we know that Ferrari can have in the past had some problems which didn't precisely cost them the 2022 World Championship, but let's be honest, it was one of the motivating factors behind the collapse of their title challenge during that season. So Vigna's talking about it, Ferrari are talking about it. What it does mean, however, very interestingly, I thought, some of these teams find themselves in a trickier spot. This is maybe one of the reasons why, you guys remember when Steiner and Haas were vehemently against the idea of getting an 11th Formula 1 team on the grid. Obviously, they don't want to cut down their slice of the pie, sure, but equally, it's also from a talent pool perspective, because there are only so many great engineers in the world that want to work in Formula 1. I mean, there's basically, on some level, there feels like an unlimited number that will work for a certain price. But at the end of the day, if you are Haas and you're looking for the top guys, then that you can at least acquire as a team like Haas, Cadillac now are coming along with more money, more resources, and therefore, from an operational engineering staff perspective, Cadillac are eating into the potential talent pools of organizations like Haas. So that maybe is one of the reasons why they were so against it, but of course it doesn't matter. Cadillac are coming onto the grid anyway, but they are certainly Andretti, as they kind of used to be known, but now it's kind of generally considered Cadillac. They are bringing in big names, potentially from other teams, but also just talented individuals that teams like Haas and others would want to sign on to their team, but they will likely not get as paid as much as the General Motors project is going to go for. And that's what Ayakomatsu says, that Haas are desperately, if they want to take a big step forward for next year and beyond, in need of more staff. That's what Komatsu says, but you know, their position right now is not sustainable with the development they have and the progress they need to make. But the reality is they're going to struggle to do so. Yeah, they did pretty well in the constructors this year. They will secure some decent prize money as a result, but I think the feeling is from Komatsu, as it was with Steiner as well, if they want to take the next level, probably Gene Haas has to put some more money in, because if he doesn't, they're not going to have the resources to get where they're trying to go. But maybe Gene Haas is happy not to really go there anyway, despite the ambition that does exist in certain parts of that team. This as well was a big update of the day. Rumours around Daniel Ricciardo. Now, we don't know whether this is actually going to happen. I would say it's rather unlikely as it stands. But Cadillac, when they do come into the sport, they will need some drivers. The most likely option right now, I'd say, is Colton Herta. You guys remember when he was linked to the Red Bull Racing B team, right? RB, AlphaTauri, whatever, during last season or so. He didn't have the super license points. He drives, though, for Andretti in IndyCar. American driver, young, relatively young, talented for sure. He's a driver that makes a lot of sense for their project. Like, Cadillac will want an American driver. Herta is probably the man that fits the bill the most. Ricciardo, on some level, is at least an honorary Texan, so we know what's happened with him in that Grand Prix in the last few years. And it does make sense. Like, if you're bringing in Herta, you probably want someone with big commercial appeal, ideally, or, you know, Herta could tick the box of, okay, American, you know, rookie, talent, future potential, that type of stuff. You probably need, you know, like a Bottas or someone, and maybe Ricciardo fits the bill on that as well. Kind of known quantity, good from a technical feedback perspective, good market value, stuff like this that Ricciardo could fit the bill for. So, yeah, I'm not convinced, but he's definitely in the conversation, we think, for Cadillac F1. Speaking of Bottas, he did actually say that the move to Sauber was a mistake. Of course, he's not going to be on the grid as a result of this for next season. I don't know if he's going to be doing any race racing, actually, apart from being Mercedes' reserve driver, as I think maybe they've confirmed it, maybe they haven't, but whatever, that is going to be the case for him next year. Of course, it turned out Sauber were not as good as he was hoping that they were. There was also this on Qatar. You guys remember when Sainz and Hamilton got that puncture on the same lap during the Grand Prix? It was speculated to be because of Bottas, and he ran over Albon's wing mirror, and it caused the debris. But the teams, I think, after the race said that actually, maybe it was caused by marginal debris, but really it was that the tyres gave up. And this was interesting, I think, for Pirelli to note, that the tyres didn't grain, they didn't degrade. The rubber was okay, so they could do 30 laps on the mediums, and the rubber could actually survive. It was the integrity of the tyre, the going over those brutal curbs in Qatar, the triangle-shaped things they have there, was just tearing the tyre to shreds, even though the rubber was okay. So it's something to note, right, because no one was pitting that race, because they thought the tyres are fine, like we're not getting that much degradation, but the integrity of the tyre was getting ripped apart from the inside, and that caused the punctures, it ruined a couple of races. We've seen this in Qatar every year now, so the teams better learn their lesson. But obviously, ideally, Pirelli can maybe change some of the compounds to get it to that point. Carlos Sainz leaving Ferrari, he's going to Williams. I thought this was interesting to note, actually, that when he was joining Renault, McLaren, Ferrari, their position in the respective Constructors' Championships those years were far inferior to where they have been when he departed the organisation. Now, is it as easy enough to say, oh, it's the Sainz effect, and like he's obviously making the single-handed difference? No, there are other factors in play. But would I be surprised if he joins Williams and by the time he leaves they've made some progress? Look, are they going to be P1? Obviously, if you look at his last couple of teams, P4, P3, P2, I mean, you know, Williams winning the championship in 2027 or 2028 or whatever, when Sainz would hypothetically leave in that type of a scenario, doubtful. But still, could Sainz make some progress with Williams and the team? I think that is probably expected. Of course, McLaren, though, are your World Constructors champions. Next season is going to be fascinating for so many different reasons. The car performance is one of them. I think the teammate dynamics are very interesting as well, because McLaren won the Constructors this year. It was a team effort on both sides, absolutely, from Piastri and for Norris. The final round, of course, Norris put the cherry on top of the cake by completing the job after Piastri was taken out by Max at the first corner. But I do think there's something to be said on Piastri's progression next year, because obviously Lando said after the race, like, yeah, we won the Constructors, but next year's going to be my year as well. And if you look at the numbers, you know, Norris destroys Piastri effectively this season, although, you know, when you actually watch the Grand Prix, especially the ones that each of them won or were in conversation for winning, Piastri was holding his own in some regards. But in many regards, obviously, Piastri was getting cooked. I mean, qualifying, race standings, all this type of stuff. Norris had his number, like pole positions 8-0 is very impressive, I think, from Lando, but also Piastri, certainly going into his third year next year, does need to seriously step up and prove that, you know, he can be a World Drivers' Championship winner, because next year, this might be the chance. You never know what's going to happen in 2026. Maybe Mercedes are back in business. Maybe Aston Martin when Newey come along. Maybe Ferrari, Red Bull, or whatever. But next year, hypothetically, it's a massive battle between the top 3 teams, maybe the top 4 teams if Mercedes can get their act together on multiple weekends as well. So it's one of those seasons next year, 2025, where anything I think is possible, and it really comes down to the execution of the driver as to whether they will actually achieve what they want to achieve in the sport. Because next year, for many of these guys, will potentially be their only ever shot at a World Drivers' Championship. So, but, you know, potentially very long futures ahead for both of these drivers. But in 2026, generally, who knows what's going to happen? Mercedes as well are taking some credits because they designed the car, like the engine. I mean, they didn't design the car. They designed the engine for McLaren's Constructors' Championship title. Quickly on Red Bull and Yuki Tsunoda as well. Of course, this is a pretty damning stat. Pierre Gasly scored 36 points since the summer break. Perez scored 21, which is, yeah, not the best. And we're pretty convinced that Perez is gone. Gasly, though, of course, is staying at Alpine. Lawson is going to be the man to come in. Likely not Yuki Tsunoda. Although, interesting developments on this. Honda, because as you guys are mentioning in the comment section below, and very much fair enough, Honda, like Tsunoda's basically a Honda driver, right? Rather than a Red Bull driver. That's at least how it seems to me. But of course, you know, Honda wants Yuki in the Red Bull because they, make the engines for now for Red Bull. So I'm sure they would prefer it to be a Verstappen-Tsunoda partnership at Red Bull Racing next year. They're probably not going to get that. And the president of Honda said, I promised Horner we will definitely recapture the constructors next year. In 2025, we'll end with a double crown, including the drivers. So we'll see about that. But still, I think the point is from Honda, look, put Yuki in the car, what are we doing? Otherwise, we're going to take him somewhere else. And of course, that somewhere else could well be Aston Martin. That seems like the candidate. Even Alonso was making the point the other day that he is treating 2026 as Alonso's final year in the sport. That, I think, is Fernando's plan. Drive next year, see what happens. 2026, have a shot at the title if Newey can cook up a car. But if it doesn't happen immediately, that might be it for Alonso. And then, assuming Stroll is magically still there, then maybe the seat is available for Yuki at some point when Honda are partnering with Aston officially. That's my expectation. And tweet your thoughts in a comment. But let's talk about the 2026 set of regulations, because these are the new images. It's been a big topic behind the scenes over the last few weeks on the changes to the regs in 2026. We know the teams are largely not at all happy with the way the 2026 cars were designed. They have active aero on the front wing, active aero on the rear wing. Ground effect is going to stay, but of course they're trying to make changes to allow following to be easier, of course with the elimination of DRS, which is a key point, but the active aero changes as in you can change the angle of attack of the front and rear wings in the corner profiles, so you can choose between a higher downforce and a lower downforce, and therefore a lower drag, higher drag version of the car in different settings. That's all going to be possible in 2026, but because the engines are 50% electrical, 50% combustion, that has created a heap of issues when it comes down to, okay, if you've got that big of a battery, at least an electrical power unit, then how do you charge it using the main engine? Does it have enough juice to even get to the end of the straight at Monza? All these questions, and the FIA have tried to answer them, and the teams have been concerned about this, and they've pushed for major changes. So this is what the new cars are going to look like. Just keep in mind, these cars are marginally shorter and marginally thinner than last year's cars. They're not drastically different. They look, let's be honest, pretty similar to the current spec. They look almost like a Formula 2 car, I would say, on some level. Now, of course, that's kind of expected because these are the base models with no changes. Like, we're not seeing any pieces on the car. This is just the spec car that the teams can therefore go ahead and work with. But this is the new updated version, and they do look, to me, more Formula 1-y. They look a bit faster, which I know doesn't really mean anything, whether it's faster or not. But obviously, the details on the floor, I would say, are quite interesting as well. And there are changes. So let's discuss some of the changes here. These are some of the initial images. These were the old spec. So this was the one that we saw a while ago. And these are the images of the car back then. So it looks like this at the time. And it's not maybe drastically different, but we are seeing some upgrades to the paint job, first of all, but also to the way the car actually looks and is defined. But these are some quite substantial changes here to the regulation. So the old front wing, it looks like this on the far left-hand side, with this like uppercutty thing, this like dagger on the left. This is now what it looks like instead. So they've quite substantially changed the profile here of the front wing. Maybe, the teams I'm sure had multiple complaints, as they always do, about the way the regulations are going to be, the restrictions on them and all this stuff. And I think one of the big ones was how fast it was going to be. There were rumors that these cars were going to be so slow, like, 6+, basically as slow as Formula 2 cars are right now. There was a concern they were going to be that slow. I think that wasn't, exciting for anyone, and the FIA have clearly come to some sort of conclusion where the cars will be better in some regard going into 2026 than they seem to be at the moment. This is the old rear wing compared to the new one here, so we don't have perfect side-by-side comparisons. I will say what I do like, though, you guys can see some changes on the rear element as well, has been changed quite considerably for the new one. We do still have the 3-element rear wing, which I do like. I think it's nice to see that back in Formula 1 compared to what we've had over the last few years. So it looks kind of good, I would say. There's also some other things to mention, of course, if you guys, we go right back through this. The new rim on the car as well compared to the older one. I mean, this isn't maybe the most substantial detail in the world, but it's front, it's rear wing, and it does seem to some that have analysed this that the floor may be to some degree less impactful than it previously was. I think there's been a talk about this, a move away in 2026 from a major focus on the ground effect, a move a little bit more back towards the front and rear wings, providing the majority of the downforce provision. The ground effect will still be there, but it makes the cars very difficult to handle. Like, they have to be incredibly stiff in their suspension so they can generate downforce being close to the floor. The drivers don't like to drive them. They're not especially, compliant as a Formula One racing car. They're not as agile as they used to be as a result. They're incredibly fast, these ground effect cars, in the high-speed corners, but they're not as good at being a Formula One car, I would say, overall. They're very sluggish in the slow speed, for example, compared to what we have seen in previous iterations of cars. So these are your new renders for the 2026 rendition, and they look pretty good. I think they look better than the previous version we had, and as I say, the feeling is they're moving a little bit away from ground effect, and it's still going to be there, but it's going to be less impactful, and the front and rear wings are going to do potentially more of the work, with active aero really coming into play as well. So yeah, it's okay. They're looking a little bit more like 2021 cars, maybe, or certainly 2022 spec. It's pretty similar in some regards. But who does this favour? That's a question. I guess the conclusion might be it could favour a team that is not as prominent in terms of like success in the ground effect era. If you're still struggling to get the car to work close to the ground, as maybe Mercedes sometimes do, and Red Bull nowadays for sure, then maybe that's an advantage going on there. But obviously the flexibility of the front and rear wings that teams like McLaren have exploited in the current set of regulations may not be, it will still be crucial, but it may not be as much of a big part of the whole development process in a couple of years' time. Just thought I'd mention this because this was Cadillac, and seemingly their new render of their car the other day was actually pretty much based on the newer spec rather than the older spec that we saw earlier. So they kind of leaked actually the new Formula 2 spec here a couple of days ago without people, it seems, really realizing it. But yeah, tweet your thoughts on this in the comment section below. They're making changes to the 2026 cars, and we know that at the 1st of January 2025, in just less than a month's time, these are likely to be final now, because 1st of January, in like 3 weeks, that's when the teams can start working on these 2026 cars, and that's pretty much what they will be doing. And whatever they've done on 2025 at that point, that's going to be left there and we'll see. But 2026 is where all the attention is, and this seems to be the compromise between the teams and the FIA to make this the best possible set of regulations that they can actually make happen. So tweet your thoughts in the comments below. Just one final thing from the FIA side. Ben Silliam has said, yeah, you want permanent stewards? Because the drivers obviously are saying, yeah, we would like to have some permanent stewards because otherwise it makes things highly inconsistent when it comes to the decisions. Even the last couple of weekends we found 10-second stop and goes, drive-through penalties. We haven't seen those in years, but the stewards have decided, no, we're going to be harsh on XYZ type of situation. And fair enough, I don't mind that if it's consistent. And Ben Silliam says, yeah, we're down to do it if you pay for them. And it's like, hang on a second here, guys. You get paid like millions upon millions of dollars per year by these teams in Formula One to make this sport happen. And, money is going into private jet maintenance. Apparently, like, how much can it realistically cost to hire, like, I don't know, 4 stewards for a season? And also, I know this isn't FIA, but this is FOM, the Formula One management group. The marshals on the race weekends, they don't even get paid because people are volunteered to do it. So they're like, well, we'd have to pay them. Why would we? So, it's one of these things where there's millions of dollars flowing around in multiple regards, and yet they can't seem to make the numbers add up to pay for a couple of stewards, whereas there's plenty of other things the FIA are able to spend money on, questionably or not. So, yeah, I didn't really like that approach from Ben Silliam, but as ever, tweet your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. And just one final thing, these are your power rankings leaderboard for the entire season. Congratulations, Lando Norris, you're world champion. Oh, well, hang on a second. No, Max won the world championship, but Lando won the power rankings. So congrats, I guess. And I think you can probably take the entire thing with a bit of a pinch of salt when you see data like that. But very much into your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.